Let's see. Hello, I see that there are a few viewers here. I'm hopefully set up to have live interaction going on here. So hopefully that's the case. If I type in the group chat, can you guys also type in the group chat or no? Because if not, I may have there may be some other issues. Okay. Hopefully you guys will be able to participate here. Once I get some feedback about whether I'm going to do some Googling on this to make sure that I'm not missing something. All right. All right. Let's see if maybe this is just like a lack of apps or something like that. Because I don't have all of the apps. Yeah, it looks like, so I'm not seeing any group participation right now. So I think what I may have to do, because I don't want to take everyone's time here, like bothering over this. Let me see. That's really weird because so Devin said that can only comment on the Hangout page. So let me see if maybe just invite you guys directly. That's possible. I apologize. This is the first time I've really set up anything like this on Google Hangouts. So I should have done like a dry run, but it was harder to figure out if that would work. Okay, so let me see if I can go invite some guests. All right, so for the future, the next time I do this, I'm definitely going to do it via Twitch. It seems like. So I apologize, guys. It looks like for the moment. So I'm watching the panel there as the list of questions. I think, let me make sure that I've sent the right information. I'm gonna just send out a quick post to the backers via Kickstarter, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks for your patience, guys. I'm sorry. Time I'll just do what I was recommended originally and use Twitch and just stop being afraid of new technology. Okay, so I had a few things I wanted to discuss with you guys, and you guys can feel free to ask questions on the Hangout page. That we can have a good back and forth, and you guys can let me know what things you're thinking about, or if there's anything that you had a concern with. And then basically then we can just kind of do the best we can with this. And if you guys have any other questions, you can always feel free to like email me or message me on Kickstarter so that we can discuss what might be missing. So, okay, I guess the first order of business to discuss is that Grave has been going really well. Our original estimates for how long the game would take to build were a little bit too tight, as I'm sure you can tell. Some of the backer rewards were estimated at January, and so far the game has been progressing along very well, and I hope that everybody got a chance to play the most recent demo. We have a bunch of content that's built out, and we're basically just tuning, refining that experience so that the interaction between creatures and weapons and all of the procedural elements of the game feel as good as possible. So the thing that took us a lot of time to get started up, which was why I wasn't fully represented in the backer demo, is our procedural spawning. And the way that that works kind of under the hood is that we have a bunch of like regions of the environment that could possibly be part of the environment at a given time. And we've got to kind of manage our like graphics memory and things like that to make sure that it's getting worked out. And then that stuff is all up and working. We've converted the game over to Unity 5, which looks phenomenal. Unity 5 has an awesome Enlighten engine, which looks really great with like dynamic. So I just noticed that Marcus had a question. So he said when he started the backer demo, the freezes and there's nothing but a black screen. So Marcus, were you trying to play it with Oculus, or were you trying to play it normal, lighted screen? Because we were looking into some of the issues. We didn't get a ton of bug reports from the backer demos, so we didn't necessarily know all of the issues you guys might be having. One thing that we noticed is that higher graphics settings with Oculus didn't work because of anti-aliasing. Like, it took us a while to dig through the documentation to figure that out. But if you're using Oculus, the settings for anti-aliasing cause the screen to just like display black. And if that's not the specific issue, then we can probably just correspond and we can figure out what the issue is, because knowing why that problem is occurring would be very, very helpful for us. I apologize that the build hasn't been playable if you haven't been able to play it at all. We did a bunch of testing. Like we had a student group that volunteered to help us test out our builds, and so we didn't get any specific reports that we didn't address. So as far as okay, so you were doing it with the first thing that I would try to do is just try the lower graphic settings. Now that may not work fully, and I can kind of do a fix for that. So I'll just basically make a new build if the lower graphic settings don't get you on with Oculus. Because yeah, like basically we had anti-aliasing turned on by default for those kind of graphic settings, because we hadn't built out our entire graphics menu for the demo. And so the reason that it was having some trouble, actually, the way that the Oculus works, it doesn't allow you to like do anti-aliasing settings and things like that. So Zach Frank was just asking about him. So I'm the game's writer, and as a writer, I'm always a little bit tentative to talk about the story. But I do have some bits that I can do. Part of the game's experience that we are excited about is just sort of like taking you on a journey and letting you see what happens. But so right now, the things that I got out are at the beginning of the game, you're just kind of like an average, everyday person who, and with the character is kind of like loosely defined because we want you to kind of put yourself into the shoes of the character. Like right now, we haven't even come up with a name. We will have a name before we release, but it's kind of like a Gordon Freeman or Isaac from Dead Space kind of character, in that you can put yourself into their shoes and the character's story is them, but you get the opportunity to kind of put yourself into the experience without seeing as much of a character as there would be in something like BioShock Infinite. So anyway, so you go home, and essentially you're the victim of a home invasion. The person who invaded your home killed your girlfriend and kills you. And so the beginning of the game is essentially your death, at which point you then follow this mysterious figure into sort of like this alternate reality that appears like it might be some form of an afterlife. And so experience in the world of Grave is kind of psychedelic surrealism based around the idea that it's not a real place. It's part of the crazed pseudo afterlife where the creatures that you encounter will allow you to kind of get a better glimpse of what this world is. Like if you're in heaven, if you're in hell, if you're in purgatory, if this is something completely different. And the journey of the game is to progress through these regions that are each controlled by a different kind of lieutenant of this person that you're trying to follow, this like nameless, faceless being. And so, yeah, and I think that is, that's kind of a rough summary. I mean, I do a little bit more information about that, but I'm kind of tentative too. That's kind of our initial push off point for the story. And then from there, I'm a big fan of like Darren Aronofsky and like Christopher Nolan and kind of like cool plot twists and things. So I can say that the premise of the story starting off that way is not how it's actually going to end up. Like we're not just going through a sequence of levels to kill the boss and then get back to life or something. So there's a lot more that goes on as you go through the game experience. So I saw Marcus said that the lower settings worked, so that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I apologize for that. That's just something we didn't catch. The next time we have a build or a demo for you guys, we're going to have a full graphics setting options, so you can like pick those settings, and we'll just default to anti-aliasing being off whenever you're using Oculus. So I apologize about that. So okay. Spartan S027 said the last demo I played, the matches last forever, it seems. Will this have a limited lifespan in later demo versions, full versions, or will we have the matches last until we throw them, since flashlight batteries seem extremely limited? So in the most recent backer demo, the matches actually are limited. You find boxes of 20, and when you strike them, you can hold them for, I think, around 15, 20 seconds, and then you have to toss them and strike another one. If you were playing the latest backer demo, there may be some other issues that, like, it might have been a bug or something like that. But yeah, basically there's a finite number of matches, and we're kind of using this to make that work right have a huge limit on the number of matches. Matches are kind of like your pistol in one of those games, that you have a large number of them and you can use them, but they have a very limited usage because you're vulnerable when they run out, and you have to take that moment to restrike them. And so they don't have as much power as something like the flashlight. Okay, so Andy Carlton had a question, so did Ben Laughlin. Andy, as far as when the beta is released, I've been trying to figure out exactly what it is that our timetable is, because, like, as I said before, we had originally picked a really, really tight time frame, so we put down difficult to see what kind of a final estimate would be. Since we've been working on the game's scope has gotten a little bit bigger, and we've really wanted to, just been great because we've been able to keep our resources going. I don't want to say something like as vague as like when it's done, because I know that you guys are eager to start playing the game. So right now, I'm thinking that we'll be able to start releasing the earlier access versions of the game, hopefully at the very end of summer, if we can pull that off. Now, hopefully that's not too long for you guys, because we're trying to target a third quarter. And I know that's a little bit vague right now, so I apologize. It's not something more specific. But basically, we have the game's shell built out. We have all of the core progression. I've been working on the script to make sure that those areas are filled with the most interest that they can. And basically been reworking and retooling things so that they can play better and feel better and connect to each other as strongly as possible. And we just don't want to release it before we feel like it's the best game it can be. And so I say Q3 tentatively. I don't want to make any false promises. So we'll make sure to keep you guys updated as soon as we have specific information. And if you guys have any concerns, like, you can always feel free to message me on Twitter at Tristan Parrish. You can message me on Kickstarter, or you can email info@Broken Window Studios, and we can get back to you that way. So I really appreciate you guys and your patience. It's been kind of a crazy road for us working on the game so far, and it's been great what we've been building, and we want to make sure that we're not just giving something so that it's finished. We want to give you something that we really feel proud of. And it's kind of that tricky thing of, like, when you're building out a game, you start seeing possibilities for things you didn't really see before. And when you do that, then you suddenly have to make the game fit those new possibilities, which means kind of going and reworking parts of it. And it's that, like, Resident Evil 2 had like a complete redo after it was almost finished. We're not quite at that kind of state, but we are releasing a game that's just good enough. We want to make it something that really, like, stays with you and has a lot of value. So I said there were a couple of, hopefully that is a good answer. But so Ben was asking if you're actually dead for the whole game. So essentially, what it appears, right? And we don't want to say too much about what that means. The story is not exactly like a Dante's Inferno kind of experience, but it's not completely unlike that either. The idea is that you may have some way of coming back to life. The person who killed you doesn't appear to be a normal human being. There's actually some there's some concept art that we shared that might be helpful, but basically, like, the person appears to have a constantly shifting face, and it's almost like a devil-like visage. Is that this person may be using some supernatural force that is allowing them to take you into this. So you might be dead, or there might be something else happening entirely. But it appears that what happens at the beginning of the game is that and the only way that you could possibly get your life back is to follow after them and challenge them head on, as well as the other beings that exist within the world of Grave. So I don't know. That's kind of a vague answer, and I apologize for that. It's like I don't want to spoil anything. I want to be able to say six, but it's kind of difficult to know where to cut that off. As far as let me try to go through these questions at all in order. Okay, so Zach was asking, is the game set entirely in a desert, grassy wasteland, or are there any drastically different? And I'll say yes, there are actually some very drastically different environments. The concept of the world of Grave is that pieces that exist in the landscape in the wasteland can sort of be from anywhere. And I don't know if that's already kind of been hinted at in the way that the world is structured in the demo we've done already. But basically, parts of the world almost appear to like exist as islands of separate locations, like they were almost dumped into this desert. And that means that we've shown some bits of the environment that have like a forest area. We have some bits that are more of a traditional Wild West. We're also kind of messing around a bit with time and place because it's a Wild West that doesn't necessarily seem to be pinned down to a usual time frame. Like a lot of the things look very old-fashioned, almost like they're from the 1800s, but obviously you have things like flashlights that defy that expectation. I can say that I know in our original demo before we did our Kickstarter, kind of hinted at the idea of like a destroyed city. So I think I can save that safely without spoiling too much. But our idea is as the game progresses, it becomes more and more surreal and more Dali-esque. So if you think that it's basically a game set in the Wild West, that's actually no story. It's not just as it's set in like Wild West and kind of forested areas and possible city areas. There's also kind of things that don't make any sense at all and that are like way beyond the usual expectations of those environments. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit. This is so difficult when you're in the middle of a game and you know the answer to all of these questions and you just have to figure out exactly how to say it so it doesn't spoil anything. But okay, so Spartan asks, nighttime environments, I usually hunker down on a scaffolding since it seems enemies don't notice me or couldn't get to me, and I would have a match to keep some light so I can see. So actually, that's just something that we're evolving as we go. Creatures in our current build can get you basically anywhere. So if you kind of think of something like Left 4 Dead, where like where you go, the creatures can climb walls or burst through windows to get you. Our current version of the game basically works like that. The demo, we had to push certain of our tech back to make sure that we could meet the deadline. And that meant that some of those things like AI and pathfinding is one of the hardest kind of area study for working on games. And so like there were little issues that we could find in the backer demo where they could actually not get to you if you were in certain areas. Since we watched people play and got feedback and made sure that we saw where those things were, we were able to adjust the way that the creatures pathfind so that they actually can get to those locations. So in the final version of the game, location does play a role in that how exposed you are to the elements does determine where they possibly come from. Like they can't teleport through walls or anything like that, and you can use the environment to your advantage. Often being at an elevated position can give you an additional sightline benefit and funnel the possible places that they could get you, but they will still be able to get you anywhere. So hopefully that's a good thing and not a terrifying thing. But so hopefully that question. So Andy said, will there be any more demos before beta release? So we've been trying to figure out exactly how that is. We want to, so our first thing is that we wanted to be able to give a more public demo at some point. Like we wanted to take the backer demo and let people play who were just kind of like in the general public. But we don't want to give the general public a demo that you guys got, because that kind of like eliminates the advantage of being a backer, right, and getting the extra bonuses that you can get from that. So I think what we were trying to do is give at least one more demo to the backers as we go before we get into the official like alpha builds. Now I can't say for sure, because the one thing that's tricky about demos is that they take a time and resources just to build out that tiny vertical slice of the game experience that could be used for other parts of the game, like just building the progression. And so like for that demo, we spent a good solid 3 months on getting everything in that demo really super solid. Which was good about that was that we got a lot of features and kind of core functionality together. The downside of that is, of course, that we spent more time polishing one specific chunk than we did working on the broader whole. And so things like certain amounts of the procedural elements and how that actually fits into the full progression, we're able to do as much because we were focusing on a demo. So we want to be careful about how much time we spend working on demos, but our plan is to give at least one more demo, particularly once we the alpha state, so that everybody has kind of something to play with and can see how much progress has been made. So Marcus asked if there will be beta polls. Unfortunately, I can't answer that question right now. Microsoft has said that there are some restrictions for setting us on their platform. So they can't tell us yet what full extent of beta access we can offer. Sony hasn't been able to be super yet either. So I will say that we will try to get the beta access for the platform that you picked as your first option. And so if we can do a beta for Xbox One or for PlayStation 4, we will do that. The only reason we wouldn't is if there's some reason that the platform holders tell us that we can't let people into the beta or something like that. So I can't actually give you a full, complete answer for that just yet, because I don't want to like put my mouth and say something we then find out we actually can't do. But yeah, so all right, I see that. So Ben, hopefully, Spartan, yes, enemies always be able to find you. Yeah, and that's basically because of my experience playing something like Left 4 Dead. Because most people who played like hardcore, like expert Left 4 Dead, will notice that there's like certain choke points where you can just sort of sit and like ulted with your guns, just shooting into a corridor, or like stepping on someone's head and jumping on top of like a barrel and then just sitting there and mowing through enemies because they can't get to you. And so basically what we did is we gave our enemies kind of like super jumping abilities so that if they need to, they can jump them where they are to where you are. And so far we found it that it's actually like pretty alarming, because you'll stand on top of something and be like, oh, that guy can't get me. And then he'll just like leap into your face and kill you. And we want to do that so that we have a good balance, right? Because we don't want the environment to be exploited. We want the environment to aid in the tension and make the experience interesting. But yeah, so let's see. Ben, you had a question. On the first night in the demo, I had a hard time surviving because I couldn't get survive in time. Could there be maybe a neutral friendly NPC that guides you and then leaves or dies after the first night? Okay, so as far as survival strategies, we had a hard time kind of figuring out how we wanted to tune that initial demo to make sure that everybody had the proper experience with the game in kind of a small bubble. And we ended up deciding to make the game much more intense. Like there's way more spawning of creatures than there will be in most of the game. And that's just because we wanted to make sure people had a proper exposure to the creatures that you encounter. Like, because the demo is kind of a fixed chunk of play, we didn't want you to do and like have a night where it was like really, really easy and then you just were like, oh, that wasn't really that interesting. That being said, we plan on like basically it out so that the initial introduction of the game kind of gives you exposure to supplies and things that you need before you have to like go head first. That being said, there may be some friendly NPCs, but we're kind of building the game around the idea of like how you feel when you're playing like late 90s horror games where you are like, you don't have a buddy AI hanging out with you or like a co-op partner. It's basically just you alone with the elements until it's spawning in multiplayer, extra guys to like mess with your head. But yeah, basically, like, we will probably have some friendly NPCs, but they may not be used in quite that way because we don't want friendly NPCs to make you feel safe, if that makes sense. Hopefully that's understandable. Yeah, actually, so I had a couple of questions that people asked me based on the surveys. So we sent out the surveys to everybody, and that took a really long time. I apologize. Kickstarter is terrible sending out surveys, and we had to make sure we had all of our like plans scheduled out and everything. But so one of the things I want to make sure everybody knew, if they didn't get it, they officially confirmed for PlayStation 4. So the game is no longer just PC, Steam, and Xbox One. It's actually Steam, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and then standard PC download. So that just took us a little extra time because we were fortunate enough, Microsoft at GDC, and they saw the game while we were showing it at the Mix Exchange event. And because they saw the game, they really got firsthand experience with it. They really liked it and like breezed us through their confirmation process. Sony, we didn't meet with them during GDC before our Kickstarter. So we essentially just filled out a form on their website, did it, and had to kind of like wait to hear back. And because we're still kind of a small, relatively unknown team, it's harder to get that kind of approval. I think now approved for both platforms for Grave, our general exposure is going to be a little bit bigger, and it's easier for us to contact press and speak with manufacturers and all that kind of stuff. So I think sometimes people don't realize that, like, if you're not a mainstream game developer, like I had some game industry experience before doing this, but we didn't have like one of those top build names like Warren Spector or Peter Molyneux or something like that. And because we didn't have a bunch of shippers, they would basically question our chops when we filled out those kind of applications. And so hopefully that makes sense, but they were coming to PS4 and Xbox One. And I'm looking forward to actually getting all those builds out because it's super fun. So I think I got through all the immediate questions. If I missed a question somewhere, somebody can also ask me again. So let me see, because I had some notes on things that I was going to discuss. So as far as Graves' progress and all that kind of stuff, right now I've been really big in working on the script. The engineers have been working on building the Unity 5 version and finalizing all of the procedural stuff. So we have like the shell of the game, and we're just massaging it better. The engineers are pulling double time. Artists are working on kind of like general assets to flesh out the environments. I'm working on the script and design element for some of our new creatures, as well as making sure that the story is actually coming together really solidly. Basically, like, we really appreciate you guys' support. We have talked about this quite a bit, like, as a team, because we feel like we've been given a serious opportunity to a game that literally we would not have been able to make if we hadn't had a Kickstarter. Like, before I finished out the whole Kickstarter bit, I think I had like $14 in my bank account, and I had quit my studio job to go do this. And so I put a lot in this game and making it the best it can possibly be. And I just want to like personally thank everyone who has supported us up until now, and I appreciate your patience, but I also just appreciate the chance to make a cool game. Like, this is something that I've really wanted to play as a gamer for a long time. And I've been core survival horror fan, like back when survival horror was big. And I've always really disappointed to see that it just didn't evolve in the way that I've wanted to see it. So you see games like Daylight come and go, and Among the Sleep come and go, and Slender the Arrival is like cool, but it's very small. And it's like, I really wanted to take the bits of those experiences that feel really awesome and fun and exciting and make that into a full game that harkens back to like when I was in Silent Hill, like as a teenager, or when I was playing the original Resident Evil and like going for like knife only runs and things like that. And I wanted to have a game that like facilitates that kind of choice. And I just really appreciate being given the opportunity to do it. So as far as moving forward, our Kickstarter budget obviously was pretty, if you look at like other games that make like millions of dollar budgets and things like that, like $37,000 was not nearly as much as that, right? But it's definitely been what we've needed. I've been looking for ways that we can subsidize if we need some extra stuff, if we need to bring on any kind of like side contractors to help us with things, or you know, like if we actually end up running and we need to like keep going. We have a few sort of things that we can do. I did a little bit of contract work doing combat design for the upcoming Afro Samurai 2, and that helped us get a little bit of a nest egg to make sure that even when we use up our initial budget, we still have a little bit ways to go. But so we may do some things to just try to get like something out there to help kind of generate some revenue for the company so that we can start like building up the biggest parts of the game and getting like voiceover and all that kind of stuff. But like we want to send out the actual like physical like t-shirts and posters and things as soon as possible. And we'll probably do that before the game is completely finished. So if you guys have any questions about any of that stuff, because I sent out the surveys earlier and we had a bunch of responses already, which was awesome. So if you guys have anything that you don't know the answer to, or anything you need me to clarify, just let me know. And I try to be available. Sometimes I'm bad at checking Kickstarter messages because we have a company email and I have my personal email and I have like the Facebook page and the Twitter page, and then all of those things are just like me checking them. So sometimes I like forget to check the Kickstarter stuff and then things go too long. But in general, I think everything's going really great, and I can't thank you guys enough. I don't know. Does anybody have any additional thoughts or questions? Because I'm available. We planned on doing it for about an hour, and I guess we're closing in on that, but I wasted a little bit of being really bad at setting up a Google Hangout. So if you guys have any questions and want to ask me in the Hangout, you can let me know. I hope that I gave you the answers that you needed to the questions you asked already. So because it's kind of I don't know, I always do this kind of stuff, so I like to talk about my game, but yeah, let me see. Through and see if there's anything that we needed. Okay, so I guess I'll just say is kind of like a summary. We're targeting summer for the like alpha and beta versions. Third quarter for the actual official release. If anything happens that's different with that, then we'll let you know. The game is definitely coming out on Steam, Xbox One, PlayStation 4. We've got PC, Mac, and Linux, as well as for direct download. We're looking to do at least one more backer-only demo so that we can kind of package that with a public demo for the rest of the mainstream audience, so that you guys don't feel like you're getting cheated. And then other than that, I guess just kind of a thank you. So feel free to message me at any time with any concerns. I really appreciate you guys coming here and chatting with me. Like next, like a Twitch stream, so it'll be a little bit easier to interact with. But feel free to like hit me up on Twitter at Tristan Parrish. You can also follow us at Grave Game. We're on Facebook.com/GraveGame. And then you can also see our website, www.grave-game.com. And I guess I'm looking, I don't see any additional questions from anybody. So I guess I might just close this out. Thanks, guys. Oh, I see. One more question. Oh, the basic Unity text boxes? No, sorry. We have a couple of things in the UI that are just kind of our placeholders. And we're trying to do as limited a UI system as possible. Really want to communicate as much as we can just through gameplay and direct interaction with the game. Right now, we have some basic Unity text in a couple of spots, like describing items and your health and stuff like that. And that's just stuff that we haven't gone into yet. And I think that that's mainly because the makeup of our team doesn't have a dedicated list. So like we've got character artists, 2 environment artists. I'm game designer and like gameplay programmer, along with animator and a bunch of other things. And then we have a couple of guys doing programming. And essentially, like, we just haven't gotten to all of that stuff. And that's kind of the funny thing of, like, if we had actually doing that full time, then we would switch out some of those things. But it's kind of like, for us, it's just been sort of a reasonable expectation of like how crucial is this to change the experience versus like putting in some other kind of feature like a character animation or particle effects or audio visual effects and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just further on the backlog of things we have to do. Oh, actually, that kind of reminds me though, for reference, right now it looks like the length of the game looking at is somewhere in the 10 to 15 hour range. So it's kind of, I think it's kind of in the ballpark of what you'd expect from something like an Uncharted or like a War style length of game, except that because we have the open world and a lot of procedural elements of locations that change while you play, it can probably take people a lot longer, like maybe 20 or 30 hours if they were like really digging deep into it. Okay, so Spartan had one more question. So quick question, do you have any thoughts on a 4-player co-op mode similar to Left 4 Dead? So at the moment, no. We're not doing co-op in the usual sense. But what we are looking to, and I don't want to necessarily like promise this will be the case, but what we're doing right now is essentially building a journey style drop in and play player, so that while you're exploring an abandoned like silo or something like that, there's a possibility that another person that is exploring that same procedural region in their game might actually have their game merged in with yours. And we want to do that to create kind of like a thing dynamic in a horror game where you don't necessarily know why this person's here. Their objectives might not align with yours. You don't necessarily have to go with them. I see, let's see. I just saw that, so Devin said that there's a question that I missed. Yeah, Devin, so I'm not sure, I'm scrolling back to see if I missed one. It's possible you were asking questions on the other Hangout page because we had to transfer. Let me see how that's going. Yeah, so Devin, I just saw your comment, but I didn't see other questions. So if I missed it, I'm sorry. But yeah, so as far as the co-op thing, like, we're not doing a traditional co-op because we don't want the game to feel less frightening because other people are around. We want to use other people being around as part of the horror framework of, like, sometimes you might see them, sometimes you might not. Sometimes they might get away from you. Sometimes, like, yeah, actually, I just saw you said kind of like a Dark Souls type. But yeah, so Dark Souls, Journey, those are 2 games that we're kind of borrowing from because we want you to feel kind of like an uneasiness with the people who are around you. So even if you do find somebody and you could be collaborating, those people are somewhat, and it's like at any moment they could be gone. They could run off and then just disappear into the desert. And we really want that feeling of like being lonely because you're not completely alone. Hopefully that makes sense. So let me go through and read the other messages. So Andy said, I just wanted to say, I think your team are doing great and it's really appreciated and look forward to playing the game. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Andy. Like we've been working full time on this since our Kickstarter and really want to make a game that makes you guys proud. So I appreciate that you guys have been enthusiastic about what we've had so far. It always makes me feel all fuzzy when people like compliment the stuff that we're doing, because like you work on it for hundreds of hours and sometimes you don't realize like how much work actually goes into it until you look at the product and see that other people are like more amazed by it than you are. And because like we've just been digging into it and just finding every little bug and every small issue. And so it's always nice to hear people say that they appreciate it. Okay, so I see Devin asked a question. How much of the game is procedurally generated? What challenges have you run into so far? Okay, so that's a good question. So as far as how much of the game is procedurally generated, we've kind of been trying to find a balance for that, because what we've base settled on is the game uses procedural chunks of hand-authored content. So rather than having a game that is like a bunch of completely random environments, we're building a large library of possible locations that could essentially get dropped into the wasteland with various differences, like locations of items will be procedural, enemies will be procedural, but we're not making any locations just sort of random. There are a few like different possible variations, like it might be this configuration or this configuration. It might be this area or another area, and the two areas that connect together can be swapped out. But we really want to have a hand-authored touch with that stuff as much as possible, because myself as kind of having a background in level design, I feel like it's really important the level to communicate to the player as much as possible. And I've always felt like games that have procedural levels, like games like Daylight, miss certain opportunities to really hit the audience in like a meaningful way, because they're just sort of like rolling the dice every time they make a room. And so we're trying to avoid that at all costs, while still making it that the environments are unpredictable and strange. I think like sort of an example of how that would work would be sort of like if you took a Resident Evil mansion and like assembled the mansion with a bunch of different rooms that can connect to different rooms, and each of those rooms is kind of tailored to be a way, but the rooms that connect to each other are different each time based on the procedural elements. And I think as far as like that being a challenge, it's really just it's trying to figure out how things fit together, and figuring out what to make procedural and what to make not. And I think we're on the right track for it. It's the kind of thing that I've really wanted to see gain more of for a while. And we're really focusing on the idea that the world changes while you play, rather than just creating a random mishmash of things every time you start a new game. So every night the world changes around, new things pop in and out. Progression changes what things can pop in and out. So basically as you go through the game, the world will be shifting and changing right under your nose. And we're going to be going more extreme with that as the game gets closer to its climax. Yeah, Devin, I agree. They had very basic mechanics and really like repetitive level design, because they just had like a couple of rooms that they just procedurally popped together, and like I just don't think that they did enough. I don't think they did enough hand authoring. Is my opinion on it, because if you do something like that, you have to make the algorithms really, really good, and if you don't, it shows. And so we're trying to find a mix of both. So anyway, I saw there were a few more questions, so I want to go back. Carol said, I really enjoyed hearing all the latest. Thanks for taking the time to keep in touch. Yeah, no problem, Carol, if you're still there. I appreciate being able to talk to you guys, and I hope you guys are excited for our next update as much as I am. Taylor said, perhaps would there be a less scary version of the game possibly featuring cats? Demo gave me nightmares. Not exactly. I don't think we're planning on the cat-like version. One thing I would say, though, that's kind of interesting, that it hasn't been fully represented in the demo so far, is we really want the game to have a challenge that you can have a certain amount of control over. So, like, we've introduced certain elements like the generators. There are certain locations that have more protective elements than others. So, like, if you have a generator and you can actually fill it with gas and you can sit there, like, those locations are much safer than areas that further out. And we're sort of taking the idea in the full game that there's sort of a hub world. Like, there's a hub where you can kind of fortify yourself and be fairly safe, but then you can also venture out to go find new locations and new challenges. And so for people who are interested in the game but get like really terrified, we wanted them to be able to sort of play the game a little bit differently, almost like they were playing like a Minecraft kind of a game, where like during the night you can fortify at your hub, you sure you've got enough gas to stock the generator, and that doesn't mean that you'll be completely safe, but you can take a decision and say, okay, I'm going to pick the less aggressive strategy, try to get through the game world without being constantly subjected to terrors. And I think that's an interesting kind of thing for us to do, just so that we can let different types of players kind of pick their strategy. So let's see. Zach said, thanks for doing the Hangout. Do you know how much the game will retail when it releases so I can prepare my friends to buy it? So as far as the actual retail price, I'm not 100% sure on that. Based on the fact that the game's gotten a lot bigger, I think that the retail version that will go out to the actual like paying customers that didn't back the game early is probably going to be a little bit higher than what it did. We had the setup of like there's the base game for $15, and then for the $25 edition we had game with the Survive the Night bonus game, which is kind of like our super procedural dynamic survival version of the game. And so I think that when we come out with this, it's probably going to retail between 15 and 20 for the base game. And then for like those add-ons, it'll probably be like, it'll either be one add-on for $10 or it'll be like a couple of add-ons that make up what you guys got with the Survive the Night version for like $5 each or something like that. We haven't really finalized that because actually like Valve, Microsoft, and Sony kind of help us pick our price points. And we want to make sure that like we know exactly how big the game is before we like set our final price. So like it will definitely not be less than what you guys paid, but it might be a little bit more just because of the content we're putting into it. All right, let's see. All right, so Spartan asked, oh, I just thought of something. If you have a key, would it be possible to relock doors so that you can hide out in a safer environment? So that's something we're just kind of exploring, right? So like in the original version of the game, we didn't actually really have doors at all. So like you can't actually close doors or do anything like that. Then I tried to figure out what I wanted to do with doors, because I like the idea of like having a door with like creatures banging on it and trying to break in. Also, like in some of the test implementations we've done with that, it's like kind of easy to break the sense of tension when you have a certain amount of like guaranteed safety. And then it's like conversely, if you make a door and it just like shatters immediately and things tear in, like then it's kind of like, what's the significance of the door? So I can't actually sure. Like we're definitely always listening to feedback about that kind of thing. I think that there is some place for doors, but I don't want it to turn into some kind of a thing where like you close doors to like block enemies off and then you run around the back way and then like close another door. You know, it's kind of like, we don't want that to become a big part of the game, is just finding the place with a door, because then there's all kinds of chunks of the environment that are actually outdoors, that like, because you don't have a door, you don't have an enclosed space, you don't have the same advantages. And I don't know that we want to make interiors like definitively more effective to be in than open spaces. And it's kind of a hard question. So like, I can't say that we've finalized that yet. But yeah, right now I'm kind of leaning away from too much interaction with doors. We'll just have to see. But yeah, so I guess the last bit is like, so Devin was saying, I like that there is level design instead of totally procedural generated worlds. Seems that fully procedural games lack great mechanics that keep us playing. And it's like, and I really agree with that. I mean, I'm kind of biased because I'm the game designer. I think in a lot of cases, designers and programmers pick procedural routes because they don't have somebody who like is an experienced level designer, or they don't have who is like experienced at pacing out mechanics or something like that. And it's like, but because that's kind of my job, I just want to make sure that the game is as good as possible. The procedural elements to be part of what creates unpredictability of like when you go out into a region, you don't necessarily know, is there going to be a mountain there? Is there like a whole town there? Is there going to be some sort of a forest there? But on the minute to minute, I really want the game to play well. And I really want it to feel the way it's supposed to feel. It like you lose a lot of that when something is just too procedural. Oh, so Devin asked another question. How has Unity 5 improved the game? Well, I would say they improved it a lot visually. One thing that's good about Unity 5 on the performance side is that collisions are like 5 times as fast now. And one thing that's good is because we have our things like our matches that are actually like physical objects that you throw, like the interaction with the environment has gotten a lot better because we can actually make more detailed, more realistic fighters. And still not have the performance bogged down. But like the thing that's really been great for Grave is that they have the Enlighten lighting system. Basically lets us do fully dynamic light with realistic light bounces. So like when a light shines into a room, like from actually like bounces off the floor and kind of like scatters around the room. And so like, whereas before we were concerned about making sure that everywhere in the shadows was really, really dark at the time because we wanted it to feel kind of oppressive and lonely. Now that we have Enlighten, we can kind of get both of those things because Enlighten lets us really create a very rich space to walk around in. And because Enlighten is dynamic, we can do like, as the sun shifts in the sky, the whole lighting environment of the interior spaces completely changes. And I'm looking forward to start showing some screenshots for that. We've just kind of been building all the content back up to make sure that our shaders are set up, reels are in good shape. But yeah, it makes the kind of game that we're making just so much more immersive because we have those daytime and those night experiences. And it's like, you can even see things like when you're holding your flashlight around, like the flashlight doesn't just hit a beam like right in front of you anymore. It actually hits the wall, bounces off, and kind of like illuminates areas directly nearby you. So when you're moving your flashlight around or you're throwing a match around, you actually get to see this kind of like play in the environment that's just like, it's perfect for a game like this. It's so light focused. So I think the last thing that was Spartan. All right, makes sense since it would break some of the tension. Perhaps it could be certain doors such as wood, iron, etc. Yeah, I agree. I think that's and one of the things that we haven't fully demonstrated right now is the role of kind of like puzzle solving in the broader gameplay experience. And I think that there's a certain amount of puzzle solving, like kind of dynamic puzzles that we're kind of wanting to engage people with. So like we're going to be doing more with objects that you can actually burn and destroy in the environment. So it won't just be things that are like scripted moments. We want to make sure that there's a regular kind of hay bales. You can throw matches into hay bales. Hay bales will like burst into flames and give you a temporary kind of fortification there. And the same, there'll be certain types of lights that you can actually light like a lamp in the environment and do those kind of things to give you more protection than just your inventory by itself. And I'm hoping those kind of things will create a stronger dynamic with you and the environment. And then we'll just kind of see how doors fit into that, because like I think that there's something to be done with that, and it's like a world that doesn't have any doors except for like specific narrative moments is like a little bit light. And I think that we're definitely going to look at that and see. Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate you guys coming in. So I'll try to do a little bit more stuff like this more often. So the main thing is that I'm just like really bad at organizing anything that's not for 12, 14 hours. So since this is on a computer, I guess I should have no excuse. Oh, so Devin asked how big the environment will be. I can't tell you because the environment is like 8 dimensions, right? Because we're not building out a progression of levels. The environment is like as big as we can fit content into. And basically what we're doing is we're building in procedural chunks of locations like all the time. There's going to be a critical path, which is sort of like the main progression of the game. But then there's a bunch of side quests and missions that you can engage in that are completely separate from that. So like you might find an abandoned hospital that has a whole separate side story. There might be like, I know we have an abandoned orphanage, which is pretty fun because we've got some screaming banshee children in there. But yeah, I mean, so basically we have kind of, there's main story missions, which we have mostly figured out. There's like side missions, which we're constantly expanding. And then there's just kind of like exploratory regions that have certain resources and things that you can use. And we're just building more of those all the time. And so the final version of the game may be like really huge. Basically, we just add a new one every week or something. And I think that will really give us a much bigger, more flexible game world than a lot of other game experiences have. And we're just trying to figure out the best way to distribute it out so that you can have procedural chunks and not be exposed to all of it at the same time, be able to kind of go through and complete them and kind of identify when you've already completed something and, you know, kind of how that plays with the procedural nature. But yeah, I can't really how big it'll be because it's like, it's going to be really big. And we're just, we don't even know yet. So, well, okay, guys, I guess unless there's any other questions, if you guys have any more questions, I'm free to answer them for another minute or two. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and wrap this. So I really appreciate it. You guys are great. If you haven't filled out your survey, please do, because that gives us all the information about how we like contact you and your various prizes and all that kind of stuff. So thanks so much. I really appreciate your interest in the game and I appreciate your support. Thanks for coming and chatting me a little bit, and we'll try to make it a little bit smoother night next time. So one more question. All right. Will torches play a role, or do flashlights matches have a larger impact on environmental changes and limited rest areas? So torches are kind of tricky, right? Because like I'm trying to avoid making too many elements in the game that overlap with other elements. And so like there's this kind of like adage in game design where like everything's like rock, paper, scissors. It's like rock beats scissors, scissors beat paper, paper covers rock, like kind of building out those kind of dynamics so that those things create advantages in specific circumstances. And it's like, so I don't want to make too many things that have a lot of overlap with other things. And torches are those things where it's like, torches are sort of like a big match. And while I think that there is some application for something like that, we're basically trying to focus on the minimum number of tools. And there are some tools that we haven't announced yet, but all of those are meant to fulfill a specific purpose that another tool doesn't explicitly fill. So like in the ones we've already given an example for, the flares are a way that you can build like a temporary safety net around you, and you can actually set it in the environment and just leave it there and be safe. Whereas like if you're using a match, you're only safe for the duration of the match being held, and things could still come in behind you and all that kind of stuff. And then like the flashlight is the one that's sort of like a set it and forget it type of thing, but it has the most finite use, and it depletes really rapidly and becoming a lot less effective when you're close to running out of batteries. And so we're hoping that each of those dynamics have a lot of specific application, and doing too many things to just do the same stuff. Right now, matches fulfill sort of the strongest environment interaction role because they're the thing that produces fire. And so like matches are kind of your old standby, but they have the added functionality of they're the one that can really easily set fires, burn things down, interact with the lean to make bigger fires and all that kind of stuff. And so we may have some other stuff like torches or lanterns or things like that, but we're trying to measure that out so that it's not utilized. And we're making them fun, interesting, unique gameplay experiences with each of those pieces that we add. Yeah, so are any other questions? Let me see. Did I miss any? Sorry for not seeing your questions earlier, Devin. Well, okay. So I guess that is about it. We went a little over time, but I also started a little late. So thanks, you guys. I really appreciate your input. It was good to chat with you and hear some of your questions. Feel free to hit me up at any time. I'm like always on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. So you can feel free to hit us up there. You could also like check out Abby or Will or Casey or any of those guys, since they're on Twitter as well. So yeah, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. And always hit me up if you need anything. All right, thanks.